request for hearing of the public, so we are just going to move on the agenda. Ms. Superintendent Mitchell, please introduce our presentations.
Yes, so I'd like to introduce our first presentation, which is going to be presented by Lisa Crew. She is from the Clark Montessori Foundation, and she's going to be presenting a request for an alcohol waiver to the board.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm on behalf of the Clark Montessori Foundation to request what will be our 5th year for an alcohol waiver for a mixer of not students, there will be no students there, alumni, parents, and faculty, to be held at the school in the cafetorium on November 10th. We will also be offering up 3 of our former liquor waiver. We also have the insurance.
Great. Other questions, comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I believe there is a resolution on the agenda tonight, so.
Okay, thank you.
Our next.
Yes, so the next presentation, and actually these are combined presentations, we wanted to provide the board with information around our quality improvement work as it relates to teaching and learning and instruction. So quality improvement will be combined academics as well as social and emotional, and so Susan Bunty, Assistant Superintendent, as well as our curriculum director with some guests from Westwood School will be here to present. Emily Campbell, our Director for Curriculum Instruction, is here in place of Deputy Superintendent Tiana Amat. She is actually in Seattle with the Gates Foundation regarding the $750,000 grant that Strive received, and so Emily is here in her stead.
Good evening, Board, and Superintendent Mitchell and Treasurer Wagner. We are excited to come and present on our quality improvement work that we are doing with our students, teachers, and community members this year. This is our work that is a systems level thinking to problem solve and engage all of our stakeholders in that process. So in partnership with Cincinnati Children's and Strive, we have come together and scaled up from some previous work with our trailblazers and pioneers who are teachers in the primary level. So now we have 2 elementary buildings who are doing K-6 ELA and 3 elementary buildings who are doing K-6 ELA and social emotional learning. We have 8 grade 8 high school math classrooms, and we have 13 high schools who are doing this quality improvement work in Algebra 1. So we thought, what better way to share some of this work than to invite guests from one of our buildings, Westwood Elementary. We have Chris Grant, our principal, Darla Sears, our grade 2 ELA and social studies teacher. She's also a pioneer, so she's been doing this for 3 years. And Nicole Bolden, our grade 4 ELA Pathfinder teacher.
Oh, you click.
Okay, I will click.
Yes. This is a PDSA board that you would see in a typical QI classroom. I really want to focus on the study part. It's not hard, or it's kind of hard to see right now, but that is my data that I'm collecting with my students. I have approximately 14 students that are reading from 0 words per minute to kids. That is the epitome of what we need to do in our classrooms, using the data to drive our instructions. And that is exactly what this PDSA is doing, using my data to weekly drive my instruction.
And from an administrator's point of view, of course, it's all about the data. So if you look at some of our data, we have a overall grade of a C, gap closing A, and improving our literacy is a C. I feel that we can improve that to a component score of a B. We will, and QI is going to help us do that. Teachers think deeply about the student learning. So as an administrator, when I walk into a classroom, I can look at a PDSA and see exactly what a teacher is focusing on. I can read it, I can go through it, the students understand it, the teachers understand it, so that way I'm getting clear data, the expectations are there, and I know exactly what we're doing. If you look at my PDSA, I'm working on, this next slide. I'm working on teacher transitions, student transitions. So third grade being a critical time, a critical grade with the third grade reading guarantee. My goal is that students, and I'm sorry you can't see it all, transition in less than 2 minutes, because I'm looking at loss of instructional time. So I'm trying to remove barriers, data, I'm putting things in place so that they can make a smooth, quick transition, because they're losing too much time. Of course, if I can do it at third grade, then I can do it school-wide. My ultimate PDSA will be the goal of a component score for a B. And I'm going to figure out the plan, the do, the study, the act, so that we can move the data and continue to grow.
All right, so I'm new to the whole QI system, and so the thing that kind of stood out to me as a new teacher to this is that it's about being the best at getting better, and that's what we should be doing as educators anyways. So it's not a new initiative, it's just something that is kind of going through with a fine-tooth comb and making our best practices shown in the classroom. Another thing that stood out to me with QI is that it's very specific, it's very intentional. So that is what we should be doing in our classrooms every day, and I liked that about it. Another way that I really bought into QI was the reflection piece. So a lot of times in the daily grind of teaching, it's easy to say, I taught that, let's move on. But the reflection piece is really important to me, to kind of step back, kind of look at what I did. What did I do? Did I meet the needs of my students? If not, what do I need to do as a teacher, an educator, to go back and change? And if I did do something good, let's keep at it. Let's keep doing that. So those components that are inherent in QI are really, really essential to moving forward and making sure that our students are successful. Oh, and this is just an example of my PDSA. So I'm focusing on gradual release with my students. So my plan is to have a percentage of my students independently write 2 to 3 paragraphs independently. And I have some strategies in place for me to do that. I have yet to collect the data, so that's why the study part is blank. But then I will look at that data, and then I will go to my ACT section and see what went well with those strategies. Were they able to do that independently? And if not, what do I need to change?
Thank you, Nicole, Darla, and Chris. In the academic side of the house, then, we are using the systems level thinking, where we plan, we make that visible to our students so they know what they are learning. We share what strategies we're going to use to help them learn it. And then we use our data with our students to say, okay, what went well when we did this, and where would we want to improve? So now I'm going to pass the podium to Superintendent Susan Bunty.
So if you remember the pyramid, half of it is the academic side of our house, and the other side is the social emotional side of our house. So a few years ago, we started on the academic piece with quality improvement, and we've learned from the work that has started there. This year, we have the opportunity to go and move forward into the social emotional realm. So we are now starting with our pioneers in K3 at Fairview, and then 2 teachers each at Woodford and or K3 at Mount Airy, I apologize, and then 2 teachers each at Fairview and Woodford. We understand the rationale for really focusing on social emotional learning and the importance of being able to do that. Carrie Bunger, our manager for social emotional learning, is going to tell you some more specifics.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Bunger. I'm so happy to be with you today. Just as Susan Bunty indicated, CPS has a long, strong history of working through intervention process on the academic side of the house in order to continue to promote success within our academic realm. We also want to provide those levels of support within the social emotional learning or the behavior side as well. So the goal of the QI SEL work is to integrate with the academic work using the same QI lens in order to support our students, promote their social emotional needs so that we see gains both academically as well as behaviorally. So in the rationale that you see there, it improves achievement. SEL done well improves achievement by 11 percentile points, increases our pro-social behaviors, and improves our school climate, reduces depression, and decreases conduct problems and risk-taking behavior. And I don't know about your stock portfolio, but the return on investment, every dollar spent, according to Columbia University, on SEL gets a return of $11. So especially when we're talking about children and the return on investment, I really feel like that's a profound increase. As Susan Bunty mentioned, we have 3 QI schools that are targeted in terms of SEL work. In choosing those schools, we were looking at that elementaries that have already participated within the quality improvement training. So they have practice in that collaborative problem-solving mindset and then integrating the academic piece with the social emotional piece. So Mount Airy School, K-3, Fairview, Clifton, and Woodford. Each of the elementary schools is receiving a part-time PBIS social worker. Their role is to support in positive behavior intervention supports, to help implement the social emotional learning programming that I will speak to, assist teachers with their classroom management, provide targeted training for teachers, and collect data. This PBIS social worker is in addition to our school social workers, and they're paid out of federal grant funding. Clicker issues. Oh, there we go. So the 2 programs that we're using through QI for our schools that you see there, on the left is PATHS, which stands for Preventing Alternative Thinking Strategies. We're targeting our young ones with K3. PATHS teaches self-regulation, social emotional skills, how to be a good friend. It will be social worker led, but also teacher supported, and there will be 30-minute lessons several times per week. Also, for Mount Airy, all K-3, and then it's being piloted at Woodford and Fairview, is something called the Good Behavior Game, or PACS. Of course, one had to be PATHS and one had to be PACS, just to be fun for me. PACS, or the Good Behavior Game, are those solid classroom management strategies packaged so that it can be like a make it take it for teachers. It's a teacher's manual of really solid classroom management. So if you look at each piece individually, you're like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. But it's so nice that it's all packaged together so a teacher can take it with training and implement it quickly and efficiently and very effectively. There's a very strong research base for a good behavior game in classroom level. That is teacher-led, so the social workers will provide support, but the teacher is the CEO of her classroom or his classroom, so therefore they will be leading that work within PACS. It was really important within the QI-SEL work that we found programs that had a strong research base and had evidence in urban settings so that we would have set ourselves up for success in terms of getting strong evidence-based work and using our grant funding appropriately. And we pause. Okay. Our QI-SEL goals that are listed there. So in partnership with Children's Hospital, Our goals are to train QI/SEL teachers, support them in their classroom management, provide coaching, and then continue to collect data. We are in our infancy, so we are not as exceptional in our data collection and reflection at this point, but we certainly want to continue that work so that we have PDSA boards long-term similar to our academic friends, so that we can be reflecting on and acting upon our social emotional learning within these particular buildings. And in terms of our work this year in those 3 schools, we will touch 1,700 students and 90 teachers in terms of promoting social emotional learning, with the goal of overall reducing disciplinary consequences and reducing that lost instructional time due to student removals or being removed from the classroom.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Davis.
I just got a quick question in regard to the expansion of QI for social emotional learning. Where are we going next? Those 3 schools, cool, but when are we getting to some of the more challenging schools?
So that's an excellent question. So in terms of the grant funding support, I have focused this evening's presentation on our QI/SEL schools, which are those 3 schools. We have hired 6 social workers that are working with 16 schools. Some of them are elementary, some are high school, and there are definitely schools of need there. They're just not within QI/SEL. So it's broader in scope. I just, for the purpose of this presentation, focused on the QI/SEL schools.
Much appreciated, Dr. Bunker.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Messer?
I want to thank you all for coming in. Just even more confidence in all the great things that are happening at CPS. I think there's a whole demographic of population who would think, holy cow, education has changed since my kids went through or since I went through. And I think all the words you said, anybody in business, anybody in healthcare, everybody's about quality improvement. If you're not measuring, how do you know what you're supposed to change or do more of or less of? And I think it's spectacular. And I do wish, Inquirer, if you're listening, maybe we could get a little coverage because I do think this is what's moving the district forward. It's not an accident that your scores are improving, and you can tie it back to the specific actions and tactics that you put in place at the classroom level. So I think this is just, as a numbers guy, I love this. So thank you for that. And then, I think the question I kind of have is kind of the OZ. It's almost like when you start doing a clinical trial on a new medical device or a new something, and the data is so good, they make a call where it's ethically wrong to not give everybody the new procedure or the new treatment. So my question is, I think the data is going to speak to itself. So what is the process for going further faster? Like, are there some milestones that would say, you know what, this has to be kind of system-wide. This is how business needs to happen.
So the concept is think big, start small,
Right.
scale fast. And so to really get our proof points, we've identified a few set of schools to kind of work out some of our bugs and kinks. Children's Hospital has pressed us to expand this ×5 next year. I'm not sure we're going to move that fast, because what we don't want to do is move so fast that we lose the integrity of the good work that's taking place. So we are extremely thankful to Children's Hospital around the continuous improvement work. We are steadily building our capacity of the people who have gone through the QI training. So Tiana Ahmad is going through it right now. Sarah Trimble Oliver is going through it. Emily has gone through it. Susan has gone through it. Paul McDowell has gone through it. Dan Hoying is going through it starting this month. And so we are really building our entire administrative staff at the leadership level to have that, and then continue to build that down. So not only are we using QI in our schools, we're also using it here at central office. So each performance team leader has 3 projects that they're working on with an aim drivers, and interventions that are being tested on a weekly basis. And every week we come before the team, and each person has about 4 minutes to present their team project and their run charts to show where we are each week. And so it is expanding, but we want to make sure that we have all of the supports in place so that it is successful.
Great.
Thank you. Mr. Morosky.
I think this is really fantastic for a whole host of reasons. As my board colleagues know, and people who come to our committee meetings, like Ms. Bunty and Ms. Campbell, they know that the social emotional is always on my mind. And for my money, literally and figuratively, this also has a direct impact on school safety, which of course is always forefront. I always think physical needs first, then social emotional, and then we can actually get to teaching, right? You got to feel safe and feel comfortable. And I think this is really great. And I was curious if there was, and I saw it alluded to up there, just maybe not called out explicitly, discipline infractions, or those being tracked as well in the elementary schools, because I think I know what's going to happen, that they're likely going to decrease. Is that being tracked as well?
So with the QI project, we are actually measuring it in terms of lost instructional minutes. So we are trying to increase the amount of minutes that students are actually in the classroom. So whether that be through timeouts or in-school suspension, we're measuring those minutes across those 3 settings.
And that's pertinent to tonight because I believe the 8th resolution that I am reading regards emergency removal of students that we've sort of amended to speak to that very issue. So it's great when you're on the same page. Good word, yeah.
Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's very important work. Wanted to ask if you could explain a little bit more about how the PBIS and SEL and QI work, interface a little bit more together to somehow not lose the strength of any one of the programs so that they're complementary, because it's so important, as you're pointing out, to school culture and climate. How do they interface, and how are we proceeding with that interface?
It's an excellent question, and we certainly don't want to, with the best of intentions, water great work down by slapping another program, and another program, and being very intentional about the work. So positive behavior intervention supports PBIS. That is our framework and our backbone. So within the PBIS world, within those 3 tiers or levels of support, the social emotional curriculum, that would be within the classroom level or tier 1 level. And then further on, as we continue to scale, then we'd be looking at for small groups of students that are at risk, what could we continue to work on in terms of tier 2 level. But right now, the focus is on tier 1, positive behavior intervention supports, and then aligning that directly with our social emotional learning piece. The QI work is collaborative problem solving within that realm. So given a particular concern within SEL, then it would be the problem solving framework of QI. So all that alphabet soup to be said, PBIS is the framework, and then we supplement within that with the SEL.
And I think that one of the things too that the PBIS does is that this affords us a curriculum. So just as we have the tiers of intervention in academics, by implementing PASS and the good behavior game, it gives us an SEL curriculum that we haven't had before. So that also supports that core instruction around what behavior is. The PBIS is the frame for that.
Yes.
Just one comment. We were just talking about it. I like that you're focusing on instructional time not being lost, because that's really what behavior pieces and climate and culture is actually about. And if you're focusing on instructional time, then that not only is a better way to report it out for the community, but it also reestablishes the single most important thing is the instructional time that the children are there, period, over and done with. Everything else is secondary. And so I really like the way you're measuring it. I think that's really good.
And my comment follows that, in that I think it indicates a shift to a more equitable practice that allows all kids to learn at their own pace. They only get timeouts like when they really need it because they're spending time in the classroom. So thanks for that. Other questions and comments? Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. Okay, we're at the item on the agenda for resolutions. Ms. Bates, would you please present the following resolution for board consideration?
Yes, I have a resolution to request a waiver for alcohol use at Clark Montessori High School by the Clark Montessori Foundation. I present this resolution as printed for adoption.
Is there a second? Second. Discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby? Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Messer?
Yes.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Aye. Ms. Copeland Dansby, would you please present the following resolution on behalf of the board?
I have a resolution approving the exchange of real properties for development of new Stargell Stadium and new FC Cincinnati Stadium. And I do want to give a little bit of information for the public's knowledge. Whereas since April 2018, resolution was passed, there's an agreement relating to real property tax exemption and obligation to make school board payments with FC Cincinnati, which includes a $10 million payment plus $150,000 contingency fund for subsurface soil conditions to enable the district to construct a new Stargell Stadium prior to the beginning of the 2019 fall sports season, and payments to the district in lieu of property taxes that would otherwise be due on the FC Cincinnati Stadium property without a property tax exemption. Now therefore, be it resolved that it is in the best interest of the board to enter into all agreements necessary to complete the exchange of the new FC Cincinnati property for the new Stargell Stadium property and all related agreements, including but not limited to the agreements above. Accordingly, the board hereby authorizes the board president and the treasurer to enter into any and all agreements necessary to exchange the FC Cincinnati Stadium property for the new Stargell Stadium property and to implement the provisions of this resolution in accordance with all acceptable bylaws. And I present this hoping for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Mr. Morosky, would you present the next resolution for board consideration?
I would be happy to. This is a resolution in opposition to House Bill 658, Gender Dysphoria Bill. And similar to Vice President Dansby, I'll give a little backstory on this for the public's knowledge and for those who are tuned in at home. Representative Tom Brinkman, who's in the Ohio legislature in the House, introduced a bill, House Bill 658, that would, among many other things, mandate that teachers and professionals inside school buildings would be required to out students who are experiencing gender dysphoria, and went to them to talk to them. So they would be required to out these kids to their parents or their guardians, which we know, and I'll read part of this for the public's edification, which we know is not good for adolescent growth. Whereas the Cincinnati School Board provides expanded learning opportunities and choices for all students that reflect a shared concern for the whole child, whereas the district demonstrates appreciation for every student as a unique individual, whereas children with gender dysphoria may express the wish to be of the opposite gender and may assert they are or will grow up to be of the opposite gender, and whereas for some children with gender dysphoria, when they experience puberty, they suddenly find themselves unable to identify with their own body, whereas the American Psychological Association 2008 resolution on transgender, gender identity, and gender expression non-discrimination calls on the APA to support legal and social recognition of transgender individuals, support the provision of adequate medically necessary treatment, and recognize the benefit and necessity of gender transition treatments. It goes on, referencing Sterling versus Borough of Minersville, that states the Constitution of the United States clearly protects a person's sexual orientation from forced disclosure. And it ends, and it goes on, and this is all public, it's in the back. It goes on to state that this board, whereas this board has affirmed its prohibition against discrimination against students on the basis of gender identity and expression in Board Policy 5517.01. Whereas this board believes that the act of coming out can be an ongoing personal and difficult process because of potential discrimination, homophobia, rejection, or marginalization from a student's family and the community at large, and therefore the student should determine how and when to disclose this personal information to the student's family. Therefore be it resolved, Cincinnati Board of Education strongly opposes House Bill 658.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you. Mr. Davis, would you please present the following resolution?
I present a resolution to extend graduation options to the class of 2019, 2020, and 21. I present the resolution as written for adoption.
Second?
Second.
Comments, discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Mr. Messer, I'm going to ask you to present the next resolution.
Gladly. Madam President, I present the resolution affirming labor rights and obligations in public workplaces. Whereas public sector employees, including AFSCME, CFT, CFOP, CAST, Local 20, and trades, play a critical role in our community and across the district. They work hard every day to educate our children, keep our facilities well maintained, keep our children fed, and to provide other critical services to our students. And whereas the Cincinnati School Boards of Education issues this resolution in response to the recent ruling of the Supreme Court of the United States in Janus versus AFSCME Council 31, 585 U.S., the Janus decision overturns decades of well-established law and practices relating to the right of a union to require the payment of fair share agency fees from public sector employees who decline union membership. Under Janus, public employees may not deduct agency fees from a non-member's wages, nor may a union collect agency fees from a non-member without the employee's affirmative consent. So the resolution goes on, but let me wrap it up by saying, be it resolved further, employees have the rights to be free from threats, interference, or coercive statements when exercising their protected rights to engage in concerted activity. Public employers are forbidden from interfering in the formation of union, discriminating against or terminating an employee based on union membership or activity, and refusing to bargain in good faith with the union. The Janus decision does not impact any agreements between a union and its members to pay union dues and existing membership cards, or other agreements by union members to pay dues should continue to be honored. The opinion only impacts the payment of agency fee, service fee by individuals who decline union membership. Employees may pay dues through payroll deduction. Under existing state laws, employees may authorize a payroll deduction by notifying his or her employee in writing. This writing may be a signed union card or an electronic writing signature or voice recording. Public employers may not threaten or coerce employees regarding union membership. Under many collective bargaining agreements, public employers are required to provide, in a timely manner, the collective bargaining represented with the names and contact information of any newly hired employees. Public employees have the right to keep their personal information protected by their employer. An employee's personal information, such as home address, personal email address, home or mobile telephone numbers, and other contact information is protected from disclosure to third parties with limited statutory exceptions, including collective bargaining representative. Madam President, I present the motion, resolution as written.
Thank you. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll. I'm sorry, discussion?
I think it would be, I don't know if General Counsel is here. Yeah, I think it would be useful, there's some confusion, not among us, but in the public, about what the Janus decision really did do. And our resolution addresses it, but there's a sense that somehow dues and what have you, or membership in unions is somehow curbed as a result of it. So I just think it would be good for general counsel to be able to tell us what is and isn't. I would also suggest that if the superintendent can augment her report this evening just a bit, because we didn't really get a chance to talk about the graduation piece, that I think that would be helpful for the public to know just how serious this is. But
Okay. Mr. Hoyne?
my request as we get ready to pass the issue regarding labor resolution, it would be really helpful for you to clear it up for the public what the Janus decision did and what the Janus decision did not do. Because there's confusion in the public as to somehow it has limited what unions are able to do regarding their membership and fees and dues.
Sure. So unions can continue to collect membership dues from their members. It can be checked off the paycheck just like it always has been able to be done. The only thing different at this point is that we used to collect fair share fees from non-members, folks who are not members of the union, and it wasn't a choice. They had fair share fees taken off, and that's what Janus changed. Janus says that public employers can no longer collect fair share fees from union members. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. That's all it did.
Thank you. Other discussion, questions, comments? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Absolutely. Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you. Ms. Bates, would you please present the resolution?
Yes, this resolution came out of Policy Committee, and it's a resolution amending Board Policy 2114, meeting state performance indicators, and I present this resolution as printed for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you. Ms. Bolton, would you please present the revised resolution?
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I'd be pleased to do it. However, we do have to have a revision of the resolution, and staff could do that, but perhaps we can just verbally say the revision will, as to the chairman's point earlier in the meeting regarding the agenda, everything can remain except the references to 2260. So we will cut those references in the resolution. It then becomes a revised resolution dealing only with the 2260.01. And so that's, with that revision, I ask for passage of the resolution, section 504 ADA, prohibition against discrimination based on disability.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Yes, Ms. Copeland Dansby.
Please repeat what you said about the removal of 2260.01.
Yes. We have determined to send back to Policy Committee 2260, believing that there could possibly be some language that would be more in keeping with equity rather than sameness or equality. So what it'll be is in this resolution, we'll take any reference to 2260 out and only have 2260.01 as part of the resolution.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Other discussion, questions?
Is there any reason why we can't just take the whole thing back to policy?
There's not a reason to, because they're two separate policies, and we don't have an issue about the one policy, but the resolution merged them. But
Is there?
certainly, because I don't think we probably need to, because we talked about both, and feel comfortable about the one, and feel we need to devote some more time, especially since our retreat, about, when we talked a little bit more about equity. I think that's sort of has informed us a little bit more on what we could or should do.
So 2260.01 will be brought back.
No, 2260 will be brought back. We're going to
2260 will be
Yes.
back. And we're voting on the other.
2260.
Yes.
Okay.
You got it.
2260.01. Yes, ma'am.
I wonder, in the interest of less confusion, if it might be more beneficial to take them both back and then just come back with whatever's clear.
You can.
I mean, I understand the issue, but since Mr. Davis brought that up, and then our board president says .01 or not, you know, it just feels confusing.
If I might, I think the only reservation I would have is that we don't, policy committee, like all the other committees, has a long list of work play, you know, and I think that that work plan, we're happy when we're able to move a policy forward, and I think it would be important to have the current one as soon as we can, so.
It's just that it's a major policy. Well, all policies are major, but this is pretty significant, and I don't want the public to be confused about each section. So my recommendation would be to just take it back, and you don't have to work on the other, you just have to work on the one.
Right.
And then just
have to put
present
on
it
the
as a
agenda.
package and as a whole, maybe the next time we're together.
It's with the will of the board.
It's just a recommendation.
I mean, there was one minor change to .01. If this stays in effect, it's not going to make a difference.
Well, let's just make it simple. Bring the whole, since it's all part of one policy, it's just section. Let's just take it off today, defer it, bring it back with that revision.
I will say it's two different policies, but one
See the
resolution.
22, yeah.
Thank you very much.
22,
Once we fix to 2260.
we'll just, let's just bring the whole policy back,
Okay, great.
if that's okay.
Sounds good to me.
Yep, okay. Mr. Morosky, last resolution, please.
Thank you, President Jones. I am presenting a resolution amending Board Policy 5610.03, emergency removal of students, and for the public and my colleagues' edification, if I give a little explanation. You will notice a number of red lines. The majority of the red lines, if not all of them, are to bring us up to speed with the new Ohio Revised Code. Regarding this issue, emergency removal of students. As some folks may recall, a number of weeks ago, we amended our board policies regarding expulsion and suspension. And that was also to bring them up to code. And then, of course, we had some discussion and we made even more robust changes to it to make them more student-centric. So this one, if you look at the red line, the major additions are removal of a student from school should generally be considered a school's last resort. Reasonable in-school intervention strategies shall be employed by a school before a student is removed, and a student in pre-kindergarten, of note is that this greatly impacts the really youngest of our learners, through third grade only for the remainder of the school day, and shall be permitted to return to curricular and extracurricular activities on the school day following the day in which the student was removed. For all other students, that is students in 4 through 12, a hearing will be scheduled on the same day or the next school day after the date of the initial removal. So A, bring us up to speed with state law, and then B, as per referenced earlier, try to minimize and cut down instructional time. As everyone that was here before me knows, we've always prided ourselves on not expelling, suspending kids, having an alternative to suspension and expulsion program. That said, emergency removal, as was discussed in policy committee, was sometimes, at least the perception was, being used to like mini suspend. And so we wanted to button it up to make it even more focused on reducing that loss of instructional time and being compliance. So I present it as written.
Second,
Second.
discussion. Ms. Copeland Dansby.
Thank you for doing the work on this.
You're welcome.
Very important.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye, thank you. All righty, so next item on the agenda is our board matters. We have one item, which is the wage parity implementation. The board remembers at our last meeting a couple weeks ago, we had presenters who came to share with us the work that had been done as part of the Preschool Promise initiative to look at wage parity. They presented us with a very comprehensive analysis and summary, and presented some options to us about direction, where they hope to go. They informed us that there was going to be I guess a subcommittee of some sort, task force, that was forming around this. And there were questions posed to them. Most of them had to do with financial kinds of concerns. So we agreed that we would put it on the agenda today to have full board discussion, and I think we're hopeful that we can get back to them with some ideas or suggestions or concerns formally. So open this up for discussion. Mr. Davis.
I haven't had an opportunity to finish reading all of the strategies that CCUI presented, but I'm very interested to know where our 5 board members, Cincinnati Preschool Promise board members that were appointed by this body, where they stand on the recommendations of CCUI, and how will we know? I don't even know if those strategies have even been presented to Cincinnati Preschool Promise.
Right. Well, our member of preschool workforce development is shaking her head. It has been presented. Superintendent, I don't know if you have an update, or I know Ms. Brooks isn't here tonight.
I don't have a specific update on that per se. Vera Brooks, who is the interim director for early childhood, has convened. She's had at least one meeting already with the CPS representatives to the CPP board. And she's providing reports twice a month that are then forwarded to the board. So I cannot speak to this specifically, but would be more than happy to find out.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis, my just very short recollection of what I heard after we met with them is that this subcommittee would be formed to kind of flesh out the recommendations, and then they would present it to the board. So I would guess that they don't have the wealth of knowledge, but they may have the packet, the same presentation that we got.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Ms. Bolton.
I would be very interested if there is a work group or a subcommittee. I think this board needs to see the membership of that committee. And I would hope that the board and superintendent has had something to do with the appointment of those members. I also, I like the suggestion of us having an opportunity to kind of, where our board representatives are from CPP. I think that would be a great idea to get that report back. I have a tremendous number of reservations about the total report. I've only had an opportunity to review it and look through it, and I haven't had really a lot of time to reflect on it. I will say that one of the major things that is in it, first of all, we made a promise about wage equity, or wage parity, I guess is the better way to do it. And that promise has to be kept, and it has to be kept in a way that is fiscally responsible and in a time frame that makes sense before we go back to the public for renewal, which is critical, because if we don't get a renewal on this, there is no $15 million earmarked for preschool. My reservation, and I have many from the report, and I'm not really interested in any of the options that were presented. My first reservation is that they, and I understand why, were emphasizing as well as preschool. They were emphasizing preschool. They were talking about caregivers prior to preschool. And we already went there, we crossed that bridge, that this was only going to be about preschool. And we know that the problem is that you have a mix of preschool and other care within the same units, and how do you divide up your employees and what have you. I'm just saying from the get-go, there has to be an agreement that this is only about preschool. and it cannot be about anything else, and that's going to have to be addressed, because we cannot go back. We will not have enough money to do what we need to do for preschool, first of all, plus that's not where the concentration was going to be. So that's my first thing that I would like to have addressed, because once you eliminate that, almost in every third page, there's a reference to caregiving versus preschool. And so I think that has to be addressed, and I think it would be good for us to have a little bit more time for us to finish a real review and discussion, be it full board or in finance or in student achievement or all of the above. But I'm deeply committed to the parity. I'm deeply committed to only keeping the promise that we made, for sure, on parity and also on preschool. And I do need more time as one board member in order to have a opinion and view about the entire report. And I do want to see the membership of whatever is the working committee.
Okay. Mr. Morosky?
My comments will be pretty brief. I too am interested in how we can get to parity regarding the pay and how that looks. At the same time, I want to make sure, the one thing I appreciated about, I wasn't here for the presentation, but I got briefed on the presentation. The one aspect of the presentation I found the most interesting were that, I think it was none, that might be wrong, but most of the options, if not all of the options, involve not using the dollars that were allocated for the students, because I want to make sure that we keep those dollars focused on getting as many young people into quality early childhood programs as we can. Preschool, I should be more clear, not childcare, preschool. I need to be clearer about that. So I want I want to do both, and I think we can do both. That is the parity and keeping the money for the children. I too need way more time to figure out what that looks like. And if there is a subcommittee, I wasn't aware, well, in the minutes, but I don't know who is on it, and I'd like to understand more about that too, and if we have representatives on it as well.
Okay. Yes. Did you have a comment? Ms. Bolton?
I would also say there were good ideas that had surfaced even during the preschool debate and discussion, whether it was combined purchasing, whether it was back office, how shall I say it, support and administration. There were a number of things that were in that we talked about throughout the dialogue about preschool. Those things I felt very comfortable about. But I really felt at least some of the options given us still were including care and not just situated around preschool, but we do need more time.
Yes. Did you have a question, Mr.?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, just sitting through the presentation kind of one-on-one and then watching the other presentation, this is a major, major initiative. Mm-hmm. And, I think in theory, it's pitiful that our minimum wage is what it is today, period. Forget about anything else. But then looking at the most valuable people that impact our children and their success in life and the disparity that exists, I think so everyone's agreeing to that. I loved the ideas because they did pull those ideas forward that Ms. Bolton was talking about. And I think there are some very good things that we could do to help share our buying power and other assets or access that we have as a major district to then help make our community providers more fiscally viable, therefore being able to then translate some of those savings into the wages. So there's so many different ways. If you just take the nut that it takes to get us to that point, it is a lot of money. And so I think what I didn't pull out of the report was, based on this work, we think we can pull out this amount from this particular idea, and we think we can pull this amount. And I think there's a path to that. I just didn't get that final spreadsheet that gave me kind of, okay, so this is now what we're talking about. And I think that would be a one-page summary of the finance piece, talking about some of the proposals that they had and how that would then direct, we've got the top number, how that would subtract out. it gets us to a much more manageable number that people can understand. I think the folks I've talked about is like, we can't afford that. But then you start to talk about some of the other pieces, and then it's like, oh. But at this point, I think most of those are still ideas and proposals, so we just got to do a little polishing on those numbers.
Right. Anybody else? I just want to add, having been privy to that conversation when Ryan and I met with them, that I will say they've done a lot of work, and we are a lot farther along than we were. One of the things that struck me, and I did go back and thumb through the information, but one of the things that struck me, even in their presentation, and this is not a criticism, this just is kind of the way it is that sort of emphasis on the importance of the public dollar, that things had to be funded out of the public dollar. And you all might recall, I did ask a question about their gap funding, you know, and so it needs to be clarified for us, I think, as part of the options. And I certainly heard an interest in them sort of starting small, piloting, which I'm not opposed to, but again, the funding aspect of it, I think, is critical. And I think we all needed to have some more time to look at the information, because it's a lot to digest. So, so we have it sounds like we have something that we could respond to with them, and maybe what we can do is assign that to Vera, perhaps, when we get to assignments. Okay. Other questions or comments about that? Okay, so we can still read the book, though, again, cover to cover. Did somebody have a comment?
I thought Ms. Wagner did.
Ms. Wagner.
Just wanted, excuse me, to remind the board and the public that public funds must be used for a proper public purpose. That does not include children under 3,
right,
and that are in preschool.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so next item, report of the superintendent.
Yes, so I am going to follow up on Board Member Bolton's request to give some information to the resolution that you all passed regarding graduation requirements. So during the time that this year's graduating seniors have been in high school, there have been 3 different assessments that have been used by the state of Ohio for graduation. Last year, there was an amendment made to graduation requirements that said that students could use work experience, capstone projects, service learning as part of their graduation pathway to actually graduating, along with work keys, ACT remediation score, and points on an end-of-course exam. The state has now decided that those requirements will not be in place for this year's graduating class, but this year's graduating class must meet the 18 points on end-of-course exams. Again, these are kids who have been under 3 different assessments during their time in high school. Across the state, approximately 34,000 students will not graduate if the graduation requirements are not changed. So we're not asking for anyone to lower the standards for our students. This is about what's fair to our young people, and to make this change in their senior year, to say we're not going to honor what was in place last year, quite honestly, is crippling not only to our students, but it's also crippling to the economy. Those are 34,000 students who will not be in college, they will not be in the world of work, and they will not be in the military. And so this, we believe, has an economic impact on not only Cincinnati, but also the state. This also is not just an urban issue. There are a lot of kids in suburban school districts as well as rural school districts who will face the same challenges that we will in CPS. So 2 weeks ago, I was with approximately 25 superintendents in Southwest Ohio, and we talked about the graduation requirements. And they agreed to be a signer on a letter along with Cincinnati Public Schools, because we think the strength in this is just not the urban districts, but to have the suburban districts and rural districts on board too. And so those superintendents have agreed to sign on with a letter from all of us from Southwest Ohio asking that we keep the graduation requirements in place that were in place last year. My 7 other colleagues across the state are doing the exact same thing for their areas as well. there are, and I won't name them, but there are suburban districts in the southwest area who, when I met with them, said the number of kids who will not graduate, and it is alarming even for them. So they're very concerned about it as well. So the resolution, the passage of this resolution is significant. There are many other districts who have also passed a resolution. Dayton has already passed theirs. Columbus has passed theirs. Their letters are also going. So we plan to have a strategy each week, starting 2 weeks ago, from that point forward till the election of the governor, to really hit legislators with this. And so we also have a lobbyist who is working with the Urban Aid on this, and our lobbyist here locally, Eric Kearney, has been working with this as well. We do plan to have a meeting scheduled with 3 of our legislators, Catherine Ingram, Bridget Kelly, and Cecil Thomas, regarding this very issue. So again, we want to paint the picture for state legislators. We want to give faces to the number of kids this will impact. So that's just kind of an update on the resolution that you all passed. And so really sincerely appreciate your dedication to this, as well as your support in this effort. So any questions before I move on to a couple other quick
Thank you.
points?
Thank you for that update. Questions?
I was just going to say, I think it's worth highlighting something you said, Superintendent, for everybody, that these students have already gone through 3 different. So if the state legislature want to change it again, just to make it abundantly clear to everybody, that would be asking young people to abide by 4 different graduation requirements in all 4 years of their high school. And just to, I want to paint that picture clearly for folks, what our kids are up against. So I really, really appreciate the work you've done rallying the suburbans and rurals around it too, because that's super important, because our state legislature is controlled by rural districts. So kudos.
Thank you.
Ms. Bates.
And to kind of add insult to injury, it's a little off topic, but I think it's pertinent to this discussion of regarding assessments. I was reading an opinion piece by one of the superintendents in our state, and it was a superintendent, I believe, of a rural district. And he stated that we have 555 districts in our state out of 625 that got D's and F's. So, I mean, the assessments and the multitude of them and the ever-changing way that they're applied to our schools are having such a detrimental effect and demoralizing effect when we are just, everyone's working so hard. But yeah, I mean, we take it on the chin for our D, along with 554 other districts across this state.
All right, so on to other topics related to my report. It is a very brief report. Now, of course, I do have some pictures of our young people, and we're working on the clicker. AWL opened and had a ribbon cutting for its new 5,500 square foot wellness center last week. It's a $2.5 million investment, so we're really excited and happy about that. This was funded by private donations, so again, it just speaks to the fact that we have a very generous community. So this was in partnership with the Community Learning Center Institute, the Cincinnati Health Department, Interact for Health, and the Delta Dental Foundation, One Site, and MindPeace. And so we're excited to announce that. In addition, we have started a host of conversations in which we're calling them community kindness conversations. Many of you may know that October is National Bullying Prevention Month, and so we have been hosting a series of community conversations around bullying. We have led some with students. So we had a girls forum a couple of weeks ago. We also had a boys forum, which was attended by our very own board member, Mike Morawski. This is actually being facilitated by Dunny Isaacson of Bridgeable, who has been conducting these small group conversations with key community members, students, parents, teachers, and principals. Many of the kids who we talked to have been bullied, and the parents parents of kids who have been bullied. So we recognize that, quite honestly, this is not a Cincinnati public school issue. This is a societal issue that has made its way to our doorsteps, but we are taking some active steps to help combat this. All right, CPS College Night. So we hosted our CPS College Night at Woodward last week. Over 30 colleges and universities participated in this event. We had FAFSA application information, NCAA eligibility information, financial aid, as well as a CPS alumni panel of students who are college students who attended CPS, came back to talk about their experience. It was very exciting, so a lot of kudos goes out to our college manager, Kayla Ritter-Rickles. She did a phenomenal job. We had a really nice turnout of parents and students, and there were 4 districts from outside of CPS who decided to crash the party. So it was extremely well attended. So you know it's good when other districts are coming to see what we're doing. We're always happy to lead the pack. I mentioned earlier that our Deputy Superintendent, Tiana Almat, is out in Seattle right now with Strive as well as Children's Hospital to gain some more information regarding the $750,000 grant that has been awarded to Strive to support Cincinnati Public Schools in continuous improvement as it relates specifically to 8th grade mathematics. So we're very excited about this partnership with Children's, Strive, and the Gates Foundation, and looking forward to the work that will be coming forward. And then last but not least, this month is National Principals Month. So Dr. Izzy Rudnick, yes, for our principals. Dr. Izzy Rudnick commissioned portraits of each of our principals, and they were presented to them last week, and so they were along the walls of this room. So in the first row, you have Nina Giannacchio, Chris Grant, and Jonathan Brown. In the middle row, you have Larry Williams, Beth Schnell, and Kathy Wright. I really like Kathy Wright. Isn't that beautiful?
Where's Jonathan Brown at?
Jonathan is
top right, next to Chris.
Yes, next to Chris, yes.
Looks like Superman.
Kathy's looks like a glamour shot.
Yeah.
It looks really nice.
Must have been a Hughes student.
And then the third row is Michael Turner, Amber Simpson, and Steve Simler.
Wow.
Yes, so that concludes my report.
Thank you. So I think we should give another hand to our principals for the work that they do on behalf of our children. Thank you for that report, Superintendent. Is there a second? She presented it for approval. I'm sorry. We do need that. Is there a motion to approve the superintendent's report?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Did you move and second?
She moved, I seconded.
Who moved? Okay, thank you. Is there discussion? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to re-emphasize the 750,000, and I think that is specific to CPS, where it was previously thought it would be shared, and it's not only for math for 8th graders, but it's our most vulnerable students.
That's great.
So I think that's a big deal, and kudos to the team for the work that they went into it. And as I also understand, there's a lot more money where that came from. So applying a little QI and utilizing these dollars, there's some money there. So one question about your written report. So I have been looking on there, and I haven't seen, so it's athletic and co-curricular activities and the amounts. And I haven't seen any that said drama teacher, chorus director. And so the question is, if somebody leads one of those types of activities, are they also compensated similar to, and are they just on a different schedule?
Yes, so it all is under Schedule E. And so to be honest with you, I haven't paid attention to previous ones to see if other club facilitators have come through other than athletics, but they all should come through the board. Assistant Superintendent Bill Miles. Have we had any come through yet? I'm gonna be honest with you, I can't remember.
I believe so, but
Yeah.
I know when we were working with Julie Sellers, with our contract going over Schedule E, we wanted to make sure that the band director got paid the same amount as the head football coach or basketball coach, so that there was some difference, some equal amounts given to both of those. But I believe they have gone through.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is, and Josh and I were talking today, is about separating those out, because those conversations, those questions keep coming up from the board. What are those that are elementary? What are those that are athletics? What are those about some clubs? So we did have that conversation during our one-on-one to see if we can separate those out.
But I would be happy to pull the previous recommendations so far this year to be able to highlight any non-athletic clubs that have come before the board for approval.
Do that. Other questions, comments? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Ms. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion? Yes, Ms. Bolton.
I believe this is when we're going to be approving the 5-year forecast through your treasurer's report.
That's correct.
And appreciate the extra time you've been able to make available for folks to do some FaceTime about each of the questions. I would just like to say a couple things that are of interest to me, if I might. One is how we are anticipating, and we don't need to answer necessarily, but how we're anticipating the reopener that we face financially with our union groups. Also, I do get worried when the diagram actually shows on page 3 that we have a number of years where we're planning to spend more money than we are taking in. I know one of the things that got us through a couple of years or a string of years was kind of flat budgeting. I'm just saying that would be a thing that I'd be alerted about. And I'm interested to know how we are anticipating the ending of the 99 agreement in our forecasting regarding community redevelopment numbers and that relationship that we have, both from a standpoint of what the city's supposed to be funding and also us having a different negotiated settlement. I think that would be great if we could talk more about some of that, perhaps in finance or whatever. The other thing is on page 9 are those sources of revenue. I think it's like career tech and economic disadvantaged, those other sources of revenue. It'd be great to have a kind of a sense of the strategy as to how we're going to plan on getting more of that money, if possible.
Well, those two line items are in the state foundation formula.
Right.
So when they adopt a new biennium, then we can respond to that. But
And that could be part of our lobbying effort, because those are things that really serve us particularly well that might not serve some of the other districts as well or as significantly. And the other piece of that is, if you could, for my benefit and the public's benefit, kind of describe the difference between the capped and the formula piece, and which one we would like and which one we're going to be living with. And then finally, my other one is, it'd be really good to see a little bit more specificity about the number, and this might be the superintendent and HR rather than you. Every time we see a 5-year forecast, the breakdown of FTEs, full-time equivalents, meaning how many classroom teachers. And I know we've got that and you've shared that before, but I think it would be a good thing to perhaps add, even though it's not part of and I love the newer format. Thank you.
okay, so just to, if I may address just a couple of those
Sure.
things. The rest of them I can take through Finance Committee.
That'd be
but
great.
The comment about the expenditures growing faster than our revenues, we have, in the forecast, we estimate cost of living increases or economic increases based on spending trends. But we have complete control over how much money we spend every year. So
Absolutely.
as a budget adoption process, we have the ability to make decisions about what not to spend money on. In terms of the CRA agreement with the city, we just forecasted that we would continue to get the same income that we've been receiving, but it's in a growing slant going for the next couple years. The cap versus a formula. So the state of Ohio, there's 3 categories. There's the guarantee, the cap, and the formula. So no district will lose revenue from the state funded formula if they're in a declining enrollment too quickly. The same thing if you're growing, like we are, you are capped at the growth of revenue that you can get. It's 3% of prior year revenues. The formula is if you're in between and you just continue to get formulas based on your students. And so it's a very complex formula, and we anticipate what the next biennium budget is going to look like. Does that help?
That helps, because I think enrollment, we always talk about if we can keep enrollment going, then we have more money, and sometimes that works and sometimes that may not.
A better financial strategy is to recruit the charter school children back, because
Exactly.
they're taking the local share with them, and that will be a better, we'll get the $3,000 a local share back. When we just bring a new student in, you only get the $4,000 from the state.
And to a point that President Jones makes all the time as to
Yes.
why we particularly want to, not only because we want to teach them better and have them among us, but it's a financial hardship for us to lose double the money, so to speak. So it'd just be great to kind of look in terms of those strategies as we move along from and everything's about growth.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Messer?
Thank you. The one thing I wanted to call out, if you see item 9, Community Reinvestment Act agreements, just kind of pull forward our conversation from Finance Committee. As we're going through these, of course, now we're going through the lens of we're going to be renegotiating our agreement next year. And, I think it's important for us to separate as we look at the agreement. We have property abatements that are pretty much now, if you want to build $1 million house, tear down some $1 million house, you can get 10,000 abated, 10-year abated, and you can go find you some off-the-cuff person willing to pay $1,000. They'll give you a LEED certification and get you 15 years. So those taxes that they're not paying, the rest of us end up paying. So that's part of the agreement. The other part is the development dollars, and I think that one's a little bit more complex. But following our meeting, as we started to look at the durations of the agreements that they were setting, one that particularly stood out to us is the one that is a commercial, for-profit entity of a development that is being planned in Evanston. And I think we about fell out of our chairs when we saw that is a 30-year agreement. Okay? Now, I'm going to be in my 70s in 30 years. That is a long time to enter into an agreement. Protecting someone's requirement to pay their fair share of taxes. So I couldn't sleep that night. I was like, how in the world is this happening, like right under our nose? So I made a phone call to the city and actually got together with one of the attorneys who is very fluent in how TIFs work and seemed to know enough about how not only the application, but then the review and then approval. Well, I sure didn't get a whole lot of confidence that there was a lot on that review and approval piece. And so I have invited someone, whether it's this person or somebody else, to come to finance to explain kind of their process for how they dictate the durations of these agreements. And I think this is going to be an important part of the dialogue for us to ensure that as we're growing, as we have funding challenges with the state that we need to be loud and vocal on, but we also need to be thinking about the only way that looking at the projected growth that we don't raise taxes and ensure that the people who should be paying their fair share. So that in particular, it's item A, 30 years, 116 residential units. nobody needs to be released from paying fair share of taxes for 30 years. And it's an insult to our children. And then what puts insult into injury, and I think this is where we have to then have a broader conversation. So you have this type of agreement where they're promising the farm for 30 years. And then what we know today is at least they're entering in conversations, the same city, to help at least acquire or facilitate the acquisition of land for a charter school, which further takes dollars out. So I just want everybody to know, in being open and real, there may be some backdoor things happening, but we have to have a community conversation about this whole topic that is going to get real deep in the next 12 months. But this particular one, we will do research at our next finance committee to find out how do you arrive at 30 years and how do you justify that at the expense of working families.
Thank you so much. We needed that. Remind us. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
No on 9 and aye on the rest.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Copen Dansby?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Roski?
No on 9A, recuse myself from 6A, and yes on the rest.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you.
Can I?
Yes.
And I didn't want anybody to think that, like, okay, so he's all fired about it and then he voted approve. Really, all that we did, because the way the agreement is, we're just voting to be able to bill them for whatever piddly amount that they're going to settle for. So it wasn't that we approved the deal, and I think that is an important part. We've got to fix that process because, you know, it pretty much has taken us out of the decision-making when it affects our children.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Ms.
I'd
Bates.
like to add, I always vote against them just to draw attention to them.
Ms. Bolton?
I do think, too, as we look at the 99 agreement and know that it needs to be renegotiated, the public also needs to know that other items besides CRAs are in that agreement. And that there are parts of that agreement that we'll be glad to see go away from a standpoint where we've been able to release them from their responsibilities of paying for crossing guards and those sorts of things that are their responsibility, not ours. So I also do not feel compelled to negotiate anything as along the line of getting along or being along or what have you. I think we really have to be very firm because I think the community is supporting the need to have proper revenues coming from those taxes. And I think we're in the city's in a very different place than they were in 1999 where we needed to do stuff. Well, we don't need to do all of that at this point in time. But I applaud you taking this up in finance. I think it's important. But again, there's other things in that agreement that they should be paying for, and they reneged on it, and we allowed them to renege because it was in the contract itself, in the agreement itself.
Yes. Thank you. Let's move on. Inquiries and updates? None? Assignments? Ms. Copeland Dansby.
I'd like to make an assignment to Ms. Bates, the chair of the policy committee. I'd like for you to consider reviewing any procedures that the district has in place related to surveys within school business, or surveys in general. There could be some procedures there. And the reason that I'd like you to take a look at that in policy is to help the Board of Education create and implement a policy related to surveys. Will you please accept that assignment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Morosky?
I would like to make an assignment to the administration, probably Superintendent Mitchell, regarding a report out, and this is somewhat in relation to what Board Member Bolton was just talking about, actually. A report out of our school nurses and what buildings have them, what don't, and if we do have them, not to get too granular, but the hours that buildings that may not have them full-time, because Just again, so the public knows, the city of Cincinnati, these are their employees, and they were required to pay these employees through the 1999 agreement, and they have not for the past decade. And I get tired, speaking for myself only as one board member, of hearing about people whose kids have no nurse to go to. And so I would just like to get that report, because as we go into this agreement and this renegotiation with the city, I think that's something we need to be pretty adamant about. So, thanks.
Ms. Bolton.
I would just remind, I did ask for some sort of a listing of inventory or build out regarding the last district-wide safety plan, and getting that list of whatever was spent and where it was spent. I know we have to update the current one to get any more money, but I think that would be important. And I also want to see if we have received a response, and if we have not received a response from the city regarding the crossing guards, because that due date of January 1 is approaching, when we are no longer obligated to continue to pay for something we shouldn't be paying for anyway. And we cannot wait too long to find out what the situation is. Because to my knowledge, in their budget, the city's budget, they have not reassumed that responsibility.
Ms. Copeland Dansby.
I'd like to follow up on an assignment made some time ago related to safety in the community of Avondale, near the South Avondale School. And coupled along with that is an update from the police chief related to any initiatives surrounding our most inner city schools. We had a conversation here some years ago, and we were promised extra patrols and some other things, so we brought that up maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago. So I'm looking for an update and a plan to time where our chief or whomever can come before the Board of Education and give us an update.
I would be happy to follow up on the last 2 assignments that were given around the spending by the city and the crossing guard. That is work that the administration has worked on, so we'll be getting that information to you very soon.
Great.
We also did put in a call to the police department regarding the activity that was taking place around South Avondale School, and also released a video to the police department to be able to see what we were speaking of. And so we did meet with the police department, and I'll be providing a written update to you about that very soon as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then finally, just a reminder, couple of reminders. One, regarding the need to follow up on the preschool, the wage parity implementation. And then to remind board members that we have our work to finish up the work retreat, the retreat that we had on Saturday, to make sure we get our reviews in as soon as possible. I think that's it. Yes.
Yeah, one thing that I was just wondering about, several meetings back, we had some CPS students who came to talk to us about safety walking to their school, and I believe that was Sands. Mm-hmm. Wasn't that? And so I know that there was a pool of dollars that they thought we might have access to. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what was the outcome and or next steps of that inquiry. Does anybody remember that?
So our operating officer, Scott Adams will come forward with that information.
Can you hear me, or should I get it's got to do with Sussex.
Go to the podium, please.
This has to do with Sussex Avenue, and I went over there personally and viewed the situation. I've been in contact with the city, and now we're in contact with the state. We have an appointment, I think, next week to meet with both the city and the state, and we think that it's possible just to update the old safety plan as it pertains to that area, and then we can apply and get in the chain. There's a lot of public support now, and the state's coming to work with us, to try to see if we can get that quickly.
Mr. Morosky.
Thank you for that, Mr. Adams. And I've been really interested in the whole safety plan update, and so it sounds like we can get probably a short-term win with this, but and I've said this numerous times in student achievement, and I think maybe even policy, and certainly here, so I'm going to say it again. I think it's really important that the end game is a safety plan for the entire district that takes everything into account, that is done in tandem with the transportation overhaul, that's done in tandem with, et cetera. It's all the things we've been talking about. It's all connected. So I think it's awesome that the ODOT is now roped in. High five to everybody that's made that happen. So, and it's encouraging too to hear that something could likely be done with the Sussex issue, and the Safe Routes dollars could be available once we get that plan, but then also we can extend further out.
Ms. Bolton.
On the transportation piece, I think we should, as a board and district administration, do the update that is required in order for us to get additional money. That's what I'm understanding. But again, I would like to see the initial money, since we were the very first district in the state of Ohio to have a district-wide safety plan, and there was money connected to that adoption by both city council and the board. I would again like to see whatever was spent of the monies that were gathered, but I think you're absolutely right. We need to update as best we could so that we can have the additional money. But I'm very interested to see the previous money and how it was spent.
Thank you. Any other assignments? Mr. Morosky?
This probably should have gone before, but since we're talking about it now, to remind folks that, November 2nd, the fact findings still happen, or regarding
November
November
1st.
1st, I mean?
Yes.
Okay, at 4 p.m.
Yes.
Transportation fact-finding session.
Yes. Yes.
Could I suggest that we think about, and we don't have to do it now, but we think about it not being necessarily a fact-finding, but a special public?
It is.
Okay.
We've already decided
All right,
that.
good.
Yes.
That would be great, and
Right.
I've met with the later start people today about what, their interest in that, and thinking that they're part of the solution, not an additional problem. So it's kind of, it's out there in the community, and there's great interest in it, so that we'll have
Right.
to, love to see prior to notice, love to see how the administration is organizing the meeting, because I think we could all help plan, or at least say some of the things we would like to see. I know we submitted lists, but
Right.
it's going to be huge.
Yeah. Well, I will offer if I could be of help
Great.
with that, helping you with that, and we can touch base around that. Thank you. Any other assignments? Having no other business, this meeting is adjourned.